Hello, I'm Katie Hudson, and I am from Publicis Media, and I'm going to be speaking today about how combining Web3 and AI will change consumer experiences. So I am the Managing Director and Global Head of Innovation at Futurescapes within Publicis Group, and I have about 20 years of experience in a variety of different large businesses. I took a career break and over the last couple of years before my current company to help tech startups grow, especially in the AI and other emerging technology spaces. But I have largely worked in the FTSE 100 in big global companies throughout my career. Obviously, currently working in advertising, if you know anything about Publicis Group. And I've also worked across a lot of other industries in Metaverse, in AI, and machine learning, certainly across the kind of data and analytics space. And I'm part of a group within Publicis that are a center of expertise on all things Metaverse, which is why I was keen to come and speak with you today. So I am part of that center of expertise, like I mentioned, which is comprised of about 100 global leaders in different parts of our group, but we've also enabled a wider group of about 3,000 professionals from across the group to run a variety of different kinds of activations with our customers, to be immersive experience architects, for example, to run NFT campaigns, to develop AI and machine learning driven solutions for our customers, to support our customers when they want to try out things like tokenization and gamification strategies. So we've done quite a lot of different things across our business to make sure that we have the ability to support a variety of different emerging technology experiences for our customers. And I also run a cadre of global partnerships with over 200 now and growing all the time of some of the hottest companies in some of the emerging technology spaces, including a particular focus on Web3 and artificial intelligence. And those kind of fall outside our traditional partnerships as a kind of advertising holding company with some of the big media platforms, for example, or marketing platforms that help help kind of run advertising in a traditional sense. What I focus on is those companies that are right at the bleeding edge of what's going on in the space and rapidly growing and developing completely new propositions for the use of emerging tech. So, and then using that in immersive experiences and gaming and lots of other types of ways. So the agenda for what we'll talk about today, one of the reasons I mentioned that last slide about partnerships is because I'm going to highlight, just to bring to life a few of the things that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to highlight a few of the folks that we've talked with and kind of worked with on a few different projects, and that have some of the really cool emerging propositions from what we kind of observe in the partners that I talk to every day in terms of the use of Web3 and AI capability and the convergence of technology generally. That's certainly not to say that any of the other people on the kind of list of 200 or our internal teams don't do amazing stuff as well. But I wanted to also kind of show you some of the latest examples of some very cool ways in which consumer experiences are changing. So you'll see a few examples of folks that we work with and that we think are pretty cool in here as well. But first, I'll talk kind of a bit about what's going on in terms of the actual kind of changes that have been happening most recently. If you're hearing a lot in the news about AI, for example, but aren't really sure why everybody's so excited about it, I'll try and cover a bit of that. Talk about consumer engagement and value and like what some of the outcomes of some of this evolving technology are going to be, what to expect in terms of simplification and automation that might be driven by some of this tech, as well as those immersive experiences that I was talking about. And then maybe a little bit of a preview of at least my opinion of what I think is going to happen next. So what's going on? What's all the ruckus? Why is everybody so excited about tech lately, especially the last few years? Everybody's on the latest tech fad. Well, AI is obviously the hottest topic of the year, and at most of the conferences I speak at, it's actually considered a bit of a dirty word because people are a bit in the eye rolling, kind of don't want to hear any more about it mode. But actually, there's a lot that that particularly in our industry that we need to pay attention to. So it's certainly affecting and most obviously kind of interesting in the areas of generative imagery and generative audio and music, generative film, and the ability to create sort of immersive spaces. So more on that kind of creative and content and production side, there have been a lot of really exciting ways in which our industry has already been exploring ways of doing cool stuff with our customers. There's certainly a lot of underlying change that's going to be happening in terms of tech infrastructure and how that's going to drive both that creative side, but also the kind of functioning of the media and advertising technology side of things as well, that's developing also alongside some of those really creative and cool things that you can kind of see evidenced as a result of Gen AI going on right now. But there's a bunch of kind of much more complex, exciting tech stuff that's happening. So then Web3, you may roll your eyes for different reasons about this. If you're a bit of a cynic and think that, the crypto winter has happened and that NFTs are dead and the metaverse is dead, certainly, as I think the last speaker alluded to, Meta and its big name change in strategy, commitment towards being a kind of an agent of the metaverse, previously have taken a bit of a different approach since focusing quite heavily on that after the last couple of years. But certainly I personally don't believe, and I'm sure the people attending this conference don't believe, that the metaverse is dead by any means, nor are all of the fantastic things that are kind of enabled by Web3 technology. If you think of the metaverse in those terms, there are really fantastic, cool things that are still happening and use cases that we're developing. So I think it's going through one of those sort of cycles of everyone got really excited in the hype cycle. We've kind of gone through the trough of despair, and now we're actually seeing some of the real utility and the use cases sort of shake out. And people are doing some very cool stuff and investing in fantastic ways of using this tech. So the key things that are changing, and so the reason why I've kind of stuck these together in a presentation is because I think actually the combined things that are going on, even though there are some different things going on both sides, are very interesting and will have some impacts on consumers along, with these tech streams going alongside each other. So first of all, Web3 is really interesting because it's an opportunity around decentralization. Certainly digital wallets are an interesting proposition because you can obviously potentially carry not only your identity, but also your assets to lots of different places. You can tokenize different offerings and offer value to consumers in different ways, but also gamify with tokenization. You can offer authenticity checking with tokenization, all kinds of stuff, access to things. There's a lot of cool applications that mean you have many other consumer touch points, and you also have lots of other data points and insight and interesting stuff going on that's enabled by Web3 technology very specifically. And then with the AI side of things, obviously, we probably have all heard in the news lots of really interesting things going on with large language models, building neural networks, the GPT interfaces that the average person can now kind of understand and use and see utility in, being able to type a command prompt into a field and then generate not just a text response, but I'll show you some cool examples of where you can actually get a lot more than that. But also synthetic data offers in advertising, for example, there's some interesting use cases in terms of ensuring privacy, but still having enough data in order to build machine learning models that are going to help enhance the media performance ecosystem, for example. So there's a ton of stuff there. So certainly in our industry, and I think more broadly in terms of consumer experiences generally that are kind of impacted by the stuff we do in our industry, there's a ton of really cool things going on both sides. So where do these kind of converge to create new ways of having relationships with consumers, new ways of creating experiences, new ways of creating hyper personalization? I think there's a lot of really cool capabilities in terms of automation, in terms of creating like assistance use cases and new social connections and affinity groups that wouldn't happen through traditional social media as well. You wouldn't find your way to communities of people that that you might really love. And actually, there's benefits from that point of view from both AI and Web3. There's new models for loyalty and fandom and entertainment. There's just a ton of really cool things that are kind of created from these technologies, let alone having a universal identity that you can actually transport with you anywhere across any kind of digital experience. Not necessarily only in a kind of Web3 sense, but, or a virtual environment, but in the real world, in other digital spaces, you can have one identity you could potentially bring with you across lots of different properties and brands and retailers and game experiences and everything. So that's actually potentially quite beneficial to the consumer, because they can kind of bring their identity, not just their kind of social security number style identity, for example, but they can bring a whole their whole selves with them across multiple different places and platforms and experiences, but also protect as much of that data as they don't want to make available to just anyone trying to kind of surf and understand who they are and what they're interested in buying. So there's a lot of stuff around push and pull and data value exchange as well that's enabled by this tech. So in terms of that value, a nice sort of segue into my next topic. I've broken down a few different kind of outcomes and use cases that I think will come from these two technologies kind of coming together and people dabbling with how they might interplay. So the first one, like I kind of talked about, the Web3 wallet, actually has a lot of data and maybe multiple aspects of consumer behavior, not just did I buy X product, or did I, go to this website at a particular time and respond to a thread on X topic. There's actually a lot of really interesting stuff that potentially can live in a Web3 wallet that's an indicator of behavior and interest, like if you had digital music in your Web3 wallet, and that actually said something quite interesting about your personality and what other groups of people that you have an affinity with, that is certainly a potential use case. You have AI that is going to enable us, or machine learning models that will enable us to look at different different unstructured data that's coming in from lots of different sources. And there's so many use cases for that across lots of big enterprises, but also certainly across a lot of consumer experiences. Large language models and neural networks, certainly there are new capabilities in terms of understanding more about context and the complex relationships between different information and language and all kinds of things that are happening from that point of view. So all of those things I think are going to contribute to incremental differences in the feeling of personalization, even without consumers necessarily doing anything. But also things that consumers should be aware of in terms of controlling their own data and making sure that they feel they still have a level of privacy. So there's obviously going to be some regulatory change around that as well, but consumers should kind of be aware that not only are they creating more data signals, and perhaps more of those data signals are being mined, or people are interested in them in any case, but they hold a lot of value. So perhaps the consumer can get something back for giving a bit away in order to achieve some personalization. So gamification is another big trend that is coming and has already been coming for a number of years. And this chart on the right just kind of gives a bit of an example of something that we look at in the media world about who's spending different times on different kinds of media platforms, and so where are the eyeballs or the hearts and minds, and we've seen that there's been an increasing push to gaming. So gamification doesn't just talk about, when I say gamification, I'm not just talking about going to gaming platforms and or playing World of Warcraft all day or playing mobile games all day, but gamification generally and gaming as entertainment is starting to make its way into lots of different consumer experiences, both in games, but also in other ways. And consumers are starting to grow to expect a little bit of gamification and also become accustomed to the model of microtransactions within games, but also potentially in other kinds of experiences. So I think there's a lot to learn from watching not only the trend towards people being interested in the entertainment side games, but also thinking about, well, what does that mean in terms of like how I need to think more differently about the consumer experiences that I design and deliver that need to have some element of gamification in them to engage my consumers, to retain them, to get their interest, in the same way that people are moving to gaming channels in terms of how they're spending their time. So in terms of relationships, new means of finding social affinity, like I said, like both on the AI and the Web3 front, there are certainly, completely new kinds of audiences and different groups that are coming together than I think traditionally, at least in the kind of advertising and marketing field, in terms of how we've thought about people originally in terms of demographics, and then maybe a little bit in terms of behavior and starting to discern more groups out of behavior. Now there's a lot more interesting kind of potentially seen as uncorrelated information than we used to have, that is bringing in lots of other layers to that information about people and what they're interested in, and potentially enabling new social channels, new ways of identifying people who have similar interests to you, who are fans of something. Like it could be a fan in a traditional sense, like a sports fan, or maybe an esports fan if you're a fan of playing or watching video games online, for example, which is an enormous community. And then also, thinking about, well, what does that mean in terms of my relationship with a brand? A lot of the younger generation folks are both more accepting of and more active in being advocates around being a brand and thinking that a brand is kind of relevant and meaningful in their life. So, all of this is something that's kind of changing culturally, but also enabled by technology. And finally, I think in this section, loyalty, the definition of loyalty, and kind of people sort of sticking together and being very interested in particular things. I've actually got kind of a picture here of people that are part of the Bored Ape Yacht Club, who, if you're into Web3 at all, you will know very well. One of the most popular and expensive NFT collections out there. But things like Bored Ape Yacht Club, community interest was one of the core things, like coming together as a common community, having an interest in these NFTs, it becoming this sort of global force, and then being part of some of the loyalty programs and some of the brand identity programs and collaborations and all kinds of stuff that has happened with it since then. I mean, it just has grown up so rapidly in such an exciting way that shows there's still a lot of passion and interest out there, and that all brands should really be thinking about loyalty the thought to what is happening with how people are kind of getting excited with what are essentially kind of completely new brands and new things to kind of get interested in, and new various sort of trends that are happening. And that's something that in our space, you need to really be aware of, so that you're kind of not just thinking in a traditional sense about, like, I'm just going to give somebody some points for taking a flight with me. Well, actually, you need to be thinking more in the dimension of why people are getting so excited, and what they want to be a part of, and why they want to earn benefits and contribute to a community, and everything in the sense of something much more on the other end of the spectrum, like Bored Ape Yacht Club, for example, and many other communities in this space. In terms of simplification and automation, consumers are going to be obviously experiencing lots of different types of AI assistants going forward, and this is one of the ways in which things will change. But you may have, in the vein of some of the science fiction that's been out on this subject, you may have kind of people like an AI assistant who is your concierge, your life coach, your friend, somebody that you interact with and actually have kind of a relationship with. In other aspects, it may actually change how you go about shopping, for example, and maybe you don't actually spend as much time researching and thinking about what you're going to shop for, but actually the AI can help you accelerate that process significantly. Now, that is certainly something that brands and advertisers need to think carefully about, because of the marketing funnel, that whole consideration funnel and the research and whatever else. If that's done by AI, a lot of the assumptions that marketers might be making about how they need to influence people may not be around influencing people anymore. It may be something that is part of an algorithm that makes a recommendation to a person. So that's something to think about. And certainly in terms of how that actually is going to impact consumer lives, well, that may mean that, very much like we've seen in retail, used to go to a shop personally and shop for something, walk through the store, touch and feel things, but actually now a lot of things are purchased online. And then you may end up kind of completely disintermediating or not having any experience like that because of AI-driven commerce for most purchases going forward. So in terms of immersive experiences, this is where I get into just some examples from a few of our partners. I'll go through these relatively quickly in the interest of time. Some of them are a little bit over a minute. So I just want to show you kind of a few points about how technology is evolving the experience of content and production in our space as well, if you're not familiar with some of these examples. The first one is a little bit about how advertising is being influenced by filmmaking. And there's a lot of technology that's happening underneath the examples I'm going to show here, and I'll flip through. Obviously, that brief few seconds of a show reel kind of gives you an example, as I said, of, that used to be kind of cinematic, the FX sort of technology that was driving that kind of production. Now that's in like everyday advertising that we see. So that was kind of change number one. Now we also see, gaming and the gaming theory sort of creeping into how ads are being designed. So we've got another of our partners here that has a kind of a very short show reel of some things that they've done that have taken the best of sort of gaming and applied them to brand use cases. Cool. Okay, so that was one. And then there's one here as well that's then starting to think about, well, outside of just like a gaming environment or a virtual environment, how are we actually going to blend experiences across digital, in real life, in gaming, wherever, and actually have a kind of continuous storyline and be able to tell that in multiple different mediums. So this is another example from our colleagues over at Radio FX.
Driving cars on a Mars tonight. We're passing on to the stars tonight. We wanna go, go. We wanna go, go.
Okay, cool. So you get the idea. And then this final example is a specific one where Web3 and AI technology have come together into an interface where you can use generative AI prompts and generate experiences like it will show, but there is a Web3 infrastructure kind of underlying it as well. So you can do this either in a kind of Web2 or normal digital experience, or you can also build in Web3 elements. Cool. So you get the idea. So those are three or four cool examples of what we're certainly seeing as far as where this is going, and how, again, content and experiences are blending. They're all being enabled by technology. They're in multiple different channels, and just it's very cool. This is kind of a very cool place to be in the kind of nexus of what's going on. But what's next? In terms of what to expect, certainly generative AI is happening and exciting at the moment. Decentralized identity. There's a lot of cool stuff we're doing in terms of tokenization, gamification right now. But this is kind of my rough guess at where I think things are going to go over the next 5 years. Perhaps there's a lot of reasons why I've broken things down in this way. A lot of this is because of the complexity of the marketing and advertising technology ecosystem, and the kind of length of time it's going to take for people to be able to adopt and change and cooperate and collaborate to build a lot of things and to make it work together. But I think, we're probably going to end up on the other end where there's true hyper personalization, hyper targeting that's enabled, that's actually beneficial to customers, where they're not feeling like they're being bombarded, but they're actually receiving advertising that they feel is valuable, and that is embedded into their experiences. It's not kind of hitting them as a kind of display ad or a video ad that feels like it's incongruous with what they're doing, or that they just click through as quickly as possible. It should be integrated, embedded with, responsive to their behavior, contextual, and also there'll be always on sort of content that's driving this sort of consumer experience going forward. So this is only the beginning. There's kind of lots of stuff that's going on. Certainly there's a ton of stuff that's on the horizon that's exciting and evolving every day. Because I work with all of our partners, I get to see all of the kind of leading edge sort of startup cool stuff that's going on. But feel free to keep in touch with me. That my email is on the slide here, and certainly kind of reach out to me on LinkedIn if you find me there as well. But I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. That's it for me today, and I will sign off then.